Hello there, fellow peregrinos. Welcome to El Camino de Santiago Pilgrims podcast, where we talk about planning, preparation, packing, tips, tricks, hacks, and all things inspirational to help you on your way to Santiago and beyond. My name is Bradley Chermside. I am the host and I am also the author of The Only Way is West, the best-selling Camino de Santiago memoir, and I have walked the Camino Frances, the French way. I've walked the Camino Portugués, the Portuguese way. I've walked the Camino Inglés, the English way, and I've walked the Camino Finisterre. Enough about me, it is time to get into this week's episode. Lace up your boots, everybody. We're hitting the road. This episode of El Camino de Santiago Pilgrims podcast is sponsored by my best-selling Camino de Santiago memoir, The Only Way is West. And the most recent 5-star review on Amazon goes a little something like this. It was posted by Ad, and the headline was "A Sunshiny Ray for a Gloomy, Rainy Day." And they wrote, "This book is a light-hearted escapism of the best kind, full of honest self-reflection, kindness, good humour and acceptance." So if you'd like a bit of sunshine for a gloomy, rainy day and a book of light-hearted escapism of the best kind, just search for The Only Way is West on Amazon. So just before we launch into this month's episode, a massive thank you to all those who have bought me coffees since the last episode. So first of all, I would like to say a massive thank you to David Topper, who said, "Truly appreciate your podcast as I prepare to walk the Camino Portuguese in June. It will be my first, and my wife is also going, and she spent several weeks on the Camino last year in Spain." So David, just to wish you buen camino and thank you very much for your very kind coffee and your support for the podcast. We should also mention Jenny Hardy, and Jenny wrote, "Love the podcast, preparing for my first Camino, walking alone starting September 1st, 2026, picking up good tips on each podcast. Thanks for sharing and learning," and thank you to you, Jenny Hardy, for your support and for buying me this coffee that I'm enjoying right now as I sit in a cafe in England. I also received a lovely message from Shell, and I think that's actually Michelle from the email address. And Michelle, I can see you're in Australia, so just to say thank you very much. Michelle wrote, "Hey Brad, I have been listening to your podcast over the last 6 months and I just completed episode 74. Eek! Just wanted to say thank you for the entertainment and the education and the inspiration. Only 10 days before I head off to do my first Camino, and I feel supercharged and ready. Thanks to you and all of your guests. Much appreciated. Enjoy the coffee," and the support is much appreciated, Michelle. So sending a big buen camino from here in England over to Australia. A massive thank you also to Morris Frank, who wrote, "Thank you for your excellent podcast and your enjoyable memoir, Buen Camino." Let me extend that Buen Camino back at you, Morris Frank. Thank you for buying my book, The Only Way is West, and thank you for buying me a coffee and your lovely message about the podcast. We should not forget the lovely Molly P, who also wrote quite simply, "Thanks for the inspiration and bought me a coffee." Molly P, that's really kind of you, and thank you very much for your support. And last but certainly not least, I got a lovely message from Lenny. Lenny said, "Bradley, thank you so much for a wonderful podcast. It's been a huge help and inspiration as I prepare for my first Camino on the Frances route next year." And Lenny says, "Enjoy the coffee, mate. You earned it." So thanks to all those that bought me coffees. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/Pilgrims podcast. That's buymeacoffee.com/Pilgrims podcast. To all of the aforementioned, thank you very much for your amazing support. Hello there once again, fellow peregrinos. We have an absolute gem of a guest, an adventurer on this podcast, a man who has completed superhuman feats, human endurance. I'm going to get into that a little bit later because I'm so excited to hear about the other adventures that you've embarked upon, Felix. So how did I meet Felix? It was around about 2 months ago. I got a lovely message through Instagram saying how they enjoyed my second book, which is nothing to do with the Camino de Santiago, by the way. It's just about me living in the north of England, being a southerner, and how much of a culture shock that was. And Felix wrote me a lovely message, and then he also said he's walked the Camino. So I thought, wow, I need to get Felix on the podcast. So, Felix, you told me you first walked your first Camino in 2017. So tell us about all the Caminos you've walked since then.
The one in 2017 was my first and my grand Camino. It was my longest by far. It encompassed 4 different Camino routes in Spain: the Del Norte, the Primitivo, the Frances, and the Fisterra. All of that combined made up a Camino of about 1,000 kilometers. So that was my big one. And then since then, I've actually lived in Spain with the love of my life. Her name is Andrea. She's Gallega. She's Galician, lives in Galicia. And we live in Pontevedra, which is a town of 80,000 people south of Santiago de Compostela. It's about 70 kilometers away. So I've done a couple caminos from there. One was a 2-day trip over a weekend with Andrea, 70 kilometers, kind of a direct route from Pontevedra to Santiago de Compostela. We stayed one night in Padron. And then more recently, I've done a spiritual variant of that Camino from Pontevedra to Santiago de Compostela, but more along the coast. So it's longer. A lot of people who do that spiritual variant will actually take a ferry, but a friend and I, we did it all hiking. So those are the 3 I've done. There's many more I would love to do. One of the ones that probably will be next is the Camino Portugués, which I believe you have done. That
Yes, yeah.
actually goes through Pontevedra, and I probably would start in Porto. It's about roughly about 200 kilometers if I remember correctly, and that probably would be my next one.
From Porto, you mean?
Yeah, from Porto in Portugal.
Yeah, yeah. That's a really, really good Camino as well. So just to unpack what you just said, because your internet connection was dropping intermittently, so I was trying to pick out what you said. I think I got the most of it. So your first Camino, you mixed 4 into 1.
That's correct. I started in Irún, just
Yeah.
east of San Sebastian, in the
Mm-hmm.
northeast corner of Spain, along the
Yeah.
Spanish-French border. And so I started on the Del Norte until I got to Oviedo. And then I did the Primitivo down to the French route along that Camino. That was definitely a more primitive route, hence the name for it. And then I did roughly maybe 70 or 80 kilometers on the Frances, which is, I, I know that was the very first one you've done, and it's the most common Camino that people do. So I did the last 70 or 80 kilometers of that, got to Santiago de Compostela, and then, like yourself on your first Camino, went to Fisterra, which is a town on the coast. It's just that if you get to Santiago de Compostela, you might as well go all the way to the Atlantic, even though that's an extra 100 kilometers or so.
Yeah, yeah, it's well worth it though. Well worth it. They're
Well worth it.
probably some of my favorite 100 kilometers on any Camino between Santiago and Fisterra. So why did you choose to mix 4 into 1 instead of doing one whole complete Camino?
Well, I first read about the Del Norte route, about how that was one of the most scenic, also one of the hilliest, which I like a challenge. I like a workout. So that was appealing to me. And then also just seeing some of the small coastal towns that really appealed to me. I had a friend in San Sebastian who ultimately he took me to Irun from, I stayed at his place the night before starting my Camino in San Sebastian. He drove me to Irun. So I got to visit him. And then also I wanted to go through Oviedo. I had first heard about Oviedo from the movie Vicky Cristina Barcelona. If you're familiar with that movie, that's Scarlett Johansson, Rebecca Hall, and who's the Spaniard in that famous actor uh, name? I can't remember right now. But um, so the route I did would take me through Oviedo also. And then
So it kind of gave you
ultimately,
the, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And ultimately, I wanted to meet up with a friend from my hometown of Fort Collins, Colorado. She was doing the last 100 kilometers on the Camino Frances. So I timed it such that I would get to the French route at about the time she had just started her Camino. And then the last few days, we hiked into Santiago de Compostela together.
So it was a Camino that ticked all the boxes for you, basically. Friendship, physical challenges, culture, favorite places.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I would say this was one of my all time favorite adventures. And I've done a lot of ultra distance adventures. But for all of the reasons you touched upon, meeting other people, I love traveling, I love exploring different places, just being out there. It ticked a lot of boxes. It's
Yeah.
exotic enough to make it a real adventure, and yet Spain is it's a first world country with a lot of amenities, a lot of friendly people. It's very safe. It's just very pleasant out there. I mean, I loved every minute of the Camino.
Yeah, it's a first world country with old world charm,
Yeah, absolutely. Now that's the perfect way to describe Spain.
I would say. I'm lucky enough to live here, and I still have to pinch myself that, I get to mix with the Spanish every day. They're such wonderful people. Um, all right, so let's go on to the next one because I was picking stuff out of your amazing Camino content on your website. And something that's I'm really interested in is a minimalist ultralight Camino. This is what I'm going to do on my next Camino for sure. You even walked Camino carrying just 2 kilograms. How can we do that? How is that achievable?
But just to clarify the 2 kilogram part. So I only did that section from Santiago to Fisterra, which was only 2 days. So if you're only going for 2 days, yeah, you really don't need that many things. In Santiago de Compostela, I was able to drop off a number of things that I thought were inessential, including, for example, I had brought a Microsoft Surface tablet computer, didn't use that at all during the Camino. I mean, I don't even really know why I brought it aside from maybe ambitiously thinking that I could be blogging a little bit during this journey. No, I did all of the blogging afterwards. So I left that in Santiago de Compostela. I brought a sleeping bag. I only used that for one night, and that was my very first night of the Camino when I couldn't find any lodging because I hadn't reserved anything in advance. Everything was completo. It happened to be a bank holiday for one of these patron saints. There are many of those in Spain, as you know. So,
Anything for a day off?
yeah. So I ultimately snuck into a building that was under construction at 1 a.m. and slept in my sleeping bag in there. And then I snuck out of there at like 5 a.m. That was the only time I used my sleeping bag. So I left that over there. And then, so for the 2 kilograms, I only brought this little rucksack, one of those that basically only has one main compartment. You can fold up, put in your pocket. And I just brought, the very bare essentials, this minimum amount of clothing, and then from there, some water and some food. Now, the 2 kilograms, I don't think included the water and the food. That would easily add, a couple more kilograms right there. But yeah, Spain is very well equipped, and you're not generally in some really remote area. It's not like you're in Wyoming or New Mexico, like in the United States, where you could go 100 miles, 200 miles without encountering a single service. No, on the Camino, especially the well-established ones, there are bars, there are restaurants, there are hostels, there are resupply points. So you don't need to be bringing the whole kitchen sink with you. And I would highly advocate to anyone doing the Camino to travel as light as you can. Like, not only will you be more comfortable carrying less weight, you'll be going faster. And I actually found it very liberating to have less things. It's just there are less things to keep track of. There is less maintenance to do. Like, for example, if you're only carrying 2 pieces of underwear, there's only 2 pieces of underwear to wash. And that's really all you need. I mean, we can go into depth, like how to deal with like the laundry issue in Spain, especially since there are no dryers. But no, you could very easily could get by with just say like 2 pieces of underwear, 2 pairs of socks, maybe 2 shirts, um, a pair of pants, and some shorts. And there really isn't that much more than that you will need. And again, the food and the water, you encounter that on the trail. So um, if anything, I would have brought less than when I did the first Camino.
Yeah, I think there's such a good idea, actually. I hadn't ever thought of that, that where if you are going to go to finish there, as many pilgrims do, to have a little repack when you get to Santiago. Just take what you need for a few days and leave it
Yeah.
in a luggage lockup, and then pick it up when you get back to Santiago. Of course, you have to go back to Santiago because you can't get anywhere from Finisterre, because you'd have to get a bus back to Santiago from
Exactly. Yeah.
Finisterre. So that is a great idea. 101 or 2 episodes, no one's ever said that before. So, Felix, you've broken new ground there. Thank you very much.
Oh, well, very happy to hear that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, mate. No, that's a really good idea. And really, what you've just described is how I'm thinking of walking my next Camino, which is just the thing that weighs the most in the bag is always the sleeping bag. And even when I was walking with like 6 or 7, I was thinking this thing is just irritating me. Like I don't know if it's just because I've got this old backpack that I've kind of become accustomed to. You call it your lucky backpack, but really you should go and buy a new one because it's got so much mileage and meaning for you. But yeah, I'm definitely going to be getting rid of the sleeping bag because you can kind of put all your layers on and sleep with your layers on. I've always got layers, whatever Camino I do, because if you walk early morning, if you're going at like 4 a.m., it can be bloody cold, even at 4 a.m. in the summer. If you're in a mountainous area, it can be very, very cold. So I always take all the layers, hat, glove, scarf, even in the summer. It sounds a bit ridiculous, I know, but that can be obviously a way to wrap up if you're staying in the albergues as well. So brilliant stuff. Thank you very much. So I want you, obviously you've got experience of 4 Caminos. I would like you to elaborate upon one good thing and one bad thing about all the Caminos you've walked. Like for you, it was a good thing that the Camino del Norte had lots of hills. And I was just explaining to my wife who I was going to interview. I said, this is Felix. He wrote to me from Colorado, which is really unusual because Americans don't normally get hold of my second book because it's about British culture. So I find that extra kind of just amusing, really.
I
And the
really
stuff he said to me.
enjoyed your book. I definitely want to give a plug for your second book. I've recommended it to many other Americans, especially those going to the UK. And I learned so
Right.
much British vocabulary from your book. So those who have not read Brad's second book, highly recommend it.
Thank you, mate. Thank you. And that's why your message was extra special to me because it came from Colorado. I normally get messages from British people about that book. So, where was I? Now, where was I? Where was I? I've lost my train of thought. That's my thought
I'm
there.
talking
But
about
so,
some of the best points and some of the
yeah,
drawbacks of each
the best points about the
Camino.
Camino. And my wife said to me, that's what I was going to get to. She said, and I said, look at all the things this guy's done. He's, been across America on a bike and done all these crazy things. And she said, wow, look at his legs. They're like tree trunks.
What's
And
that the saying?
I've got legs like pencils. So I was
Oh, no.
feeling very inferior.
Oh, you've done so many Caminos. I'm sure your legs aren't quite strong.
No, everyone always called me chicken legs at school. So I'm fine with it. Don't worry. Um, so yeah, you obviously like heels, legs like tree trunks. So tell us one good thing, one bad thing about each Camino for you.
Good thing about the Del Norte, the hills, the views, the ocean access. Bad thing about the Del Norte, it's the one I got lost the most on. First of it was, well, I had just started out on it and I didn't quite realize that, oh, there are yellow arrows that all you have to do is follow. I was trying to follow, I had downloaded a GPX route onto my phone. It turned out to be a route for cycling. And I was going on all of these roads I shouldn't have even really been on. But anyhow, so it was easier to get lost on there, especially since there are much fewer pilgrims on the Del Norte. So that would be another drawback, especially if you're looking for a company. There are some days I only encountered maybe 4 other peregrinos on the Del Norte. Then there's the Primitivo, and the same caveat about fewer peregrinos applies to that as well, which could be a good thing, could be a bad thing, depends on how much company you're looking for or how much tranquility and bonding with nature you're looking for. A drawback of the Primitivo was the lack of services on that. So there were times when I would have to go maybe 25 kilometers just to get to another town. And when I did the Primitivo, one of those days was on a Sunday. Now, as you know, and maybe many of your listeners know, almost everything is closed in Spain on Sunday, aside from bars and some restaurants. So I would have to go 25 kilometers. I would get to a town. There wouldn't be a supermarket open. Then I would be asking for lunch at say 12:45 p.m. at a bar or restaurant, then they'll say, "Oh, you're too early. Come back." Then I would have to wait like an hour, and then in the meantime, the only food I could get would be like an ice cream bar and a drink like a Coke or something like that. So resupplying was more difficult on the Primitivo. If you're not doing that many kilometers each day, just keep that in mind. You might want to be carrying more food, more water, more supplies, because you're going to have to be a little bit more self-sufficient. Now, then there's the Frances, which is the complete opposite of all of that. There's services everywhere. There are people everywhere. And again, so that could be either a benefit or it could be a drawback. One of the drawbacks could be if there are so many peregrinos, then you might find that all of the hostels or pensiones are completo. And then, you won't have a place to stay potentially. Now, what I usually had done was I would make a reservation maybe in the early afternoon or in the mid afternoon for the next town I was anticipating getting to, just so I had a definite place to stay. I did this after the mistake of the first night and having to sleep in that building under construction. So yeah, that's some of the advantages and drawbacks of the Frances. For the Pisterra, I think, like you, that was one of my favorite Caminos. I thought there was a good mix of pilgrims, like not so few, not so many, and services, and then you get to the Atlantic, and it was a beautiful Camino, although I guess each of the ones I've done have been beautiful. So yes, yeah, those are some of the drawbacks and benefits.
No, that's a fantastic overview of all of them. And I would say if you like hills, go and walk the Camino Invierno, the winter way. My Lord, it's like walking up buildings
Oh,
sometimes.
I'll have to
And
keep that in mind.
just when you think it couldn't get any steeper and harder, it does.
Oh,
To the point where you just have to laugh. Like you think, is this some kind of joke? Like, oh
that's
my
funny.
God, it's without doubt the hardest Camino I've ever walked.
Oh
But
wow, okay.
the views are ridiculous. The scenery is ridiculous.
Okay.
It took my breath away to the point where, just like when these hills got thrown at us, hill after hill after hill, mountain after mountain, some of the scenery I saw, I actually just like threw my hands up in the air and just laughed. I was like, how how
Wow.
is this even how is this even possible that something can be this beautiful? Like it's a stunning Camino, very quiet as well, very, very quiet. I
I,
think we didn't see any pilgrims until, wow, it must have been the second last day. The second last day.
oh wow. Okay.
So the winter
Yeah.
way should definitely be on your list.
It sounds incredible. I'll have to look it up. I'm not familiar with it at all. Where does it
Yeah,
go
look it up.
first?
Well,
Yeah.
you start in As. Where do we start? I think, if I remember rightly, it's Astorga.
Okay. Is this in Spain? For
Yeah, yeah,
okay.
Astorga is in Spain, and you follow it from Castilla y León
Okay.
into Galicia. Yeah,
Okay. So
and the
it is
first,
through Asturias, but okay, and
yeah,
it's a route that parallels the Frances, I suppose,
yeah, pretty
yeah,
much, yeah,
but
pretty
just
much.
through.
It runs kind of not far from the Frances. The Frances is kind of within a scallop shell's throw, but we did it back in March, and we're walking with snow-capped peaks on the horizon, like just ridiculous, ridiculous
Oh,
scenery.
sounds
Beautiful,
amazing.
thick, dense forest all the way. Oh my God, I wish I could, like that song, I wish it could be Christmas every day. I wish it could be Camino every day. That's how I felt.
Oh, that's that's great.
Um,
Thanks for the tip. They'll go on my bucket list.
no, no, you're welcome, and thanks for the overview of those four. That'll be really helpful for many many pilgrims. So you've got a comprehensive packing list on your website and your blog. I always like to ask, for my own interest as much as the pilgrims that are listening, multiple use items you carry, because we've got to love a two for one.
Yeah, I didn't have too many twofers on there, so I would love to hear some of your twofers. One of my twofers was a pair of running shorts. So not only, and I'm talking about these, short running shorts. They're quick drying. They can double as a swimsuit. They can double as underwear while you're washing, pairs of underwear. So that was one of my twofers. I did
That's a
have
threefer.
a threefer, yes.
That's a
I
threefer.
did carry an umbrella for a period of my Camino until it broke, and then I discarded it in Bilbao, I think. That provided, at least for the first few days, sun protection on the sunny days, and then on the rainy days, um, I had an umbrella. So that was one thing I carried, just a very small, pocketable umbrella. What were some of your
Wow.
twofers?
Well, when you go to Galicia, you need you definitely can get an umbrella that comes in handy. That's for sure.
Yeah.
It is one very rainy place. That's excellent. The threefer, that's a really good idea actually, because then you've got, like you say, an extra pair of underwear, a swimsuit, and also it can double up as a pair of walking shorts in the day or running shorts, because I think you run a little bit of it as well. So very interestingly, and I like this, you wrote a blog article about animals on the Camino. Because I had touched on this in my book, The Only Way is West, that very interestingly, they found out that cows were officially the most dangerous large animal in the UK. Like people have been
Interesting.
trampled to death. Yeah, people have been trampled to death by cows. You think they're so docile, but you don't want to cross a cow by all accounts. So what prompted you, what motivated you to write that about animals, and how do animals add to the Camino experience for you? Because I know for me and my wife, they really do add to the Camino experience. I love meeting the animals along the way. As long as they're not cows, I'm going
Yeah,
to kill them.
especially when you're on one of the more remote Caminos and you haven't seen people for potentially some hours, encountering another living being out there, an animal, sometimes can be very uplifting. And I got a lot of joy from seeing a lot of these animals. I love taking photos of them. I remember taking photos of one of these, so-called dangerous cows, um, getting a photo of this cow and it looked like it was kissing. And that's one photo that stands in my memory. But growing up, I grew up in a town in the Central Valley of California where there weren't many animals. The animals you would encounter were usually dogs, and I'm talking about the big vicious dogs that were guard dogs that would bark at you until you were deaf, or would run after you and potentially bite and attack you. Well, on the Camino, I was only encountering cows, cats, dogs, chickens, goats, um, very friendly animals. I remember meeting a cat that I played with for about 15 minutes. It was so friendly with me, that in a certain sense, just having grown up in an area without many animals, and then many, many decades later, I go to Spain and I'm seeing all of these animals in the countryside. It sounds maybe kind of silly, but for me, it was almost like a little safari. It's just without lions and tigers, you had the cows and the sheep. And I just really enjoyed it. And it was another thing to photograph. Yeah, and that's another thing that made my Camino just a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And one of my favorite things to do is on my packing list now always is cat treats and dog treats,
Oh, that's a
because
great idea.
you encounter so many animals that are in a bad way along the Camino, like animals and cats and dogs mainly. More cats than dogs, because like the dogs tend to be, as you say, locked up and sometimes on chains, which is heartbreaking to see. Um, but there's a lot of stray cats, and so me and Rachel, my wife, we always take a pack of cat treats and dog treats, and if we see some along the way, we'll just kind of give them a little treat. And you actually just want to continually give them treat after treat, but you think you got to save some for every animal you see. So that's actually something we really do, and it really adds to the experience for us. And I have to confess, on my quieter days, lonelier days on the Camino, I have spoken to cows, and I have spoken to animals. I have
I've
spoken to horses. I
I've
have
done the
done that.
same also,
Um,
usually in
yeah,
Spanish.
yeah, I just kind of make animal noises at them, or just say, "Hello, mate, how you doing?" and stuff like that. But yeah, it's part of the reconnection with who we really are. That's what our Camino is for me. It's like reconnection with who we really are. remembering what we really are. And we, as the primal instinct, you know, we're out there with animals and we're interacting with animals. And yeah, I love it. I love it. Absolutely love it. And that's why that article really jumped out on me. It's not just about the fellow pilgrims and the Spanish. The animals really do add to it as well. Thankfully, I've never had an angry cow try to kill me.
Thank
So,
goodness.
but I was wary of them after I read that article. So, another article of yours that jumped out at me: essential tips and resources for the Camino. Please give the listeners one tip and one resource.
Yeah, so that article, which I wrote in 2017, is a bit outdated now, but I think the primary resource I would advise people to have is to download one of the various Camino apps onto their phone. One I've been using is the Buen Camino app. Not only does it have every single route on there, but it also has links to various hotels and hostels and services. I thought that was immensely useful, and I wish I had that on my phone back in 2017. Back in 2017, I was relying more on a Camino website, and so then I'm like pinching and zooming a lot, and then trying to compare with Google Maps a lot of times for route finding. These modern day Camino apps, they make life quite a bit easier. So that would be my number one tip for a resource for the Camino.
Brilliant.
And
Whilst sorry, carry on.
uh, I guess in terms of other tips, like maybe
Yeah,
touching on the subject of what to bring, again, I advocate bringing less items, but there are maybe a couple items I do wish I had brought. And the number one item would have been a wide brimmed hat. I think the biggest like physical thing all peregrinos encounter on the Camino de Santiago is not necessarily like a blown out knee or a bum ankle. It's actually skin issues, and I'm talking specifically sunburn and increasing your risk of melanoma when you're in the sun for hours and hours a day. I mean, it's really a good idea to be shading not only your head and your face, but also your neck. And that is something I wish I had done. I mean, I came back from being on the Camino for 21 days. And even though I was applying sunscreen pretty religiously every single day, I mean, my neck was just um, a disaster, after after the Camino. So using a wide brim hat, I wish I had brought that, and that's something I would definitely advise people to bring.
that's a really good tip actually, because that was one thing that I have found difficult on recent Caminos is being in the sun. And because I've been walking, even though I've been walking in kind of like late March, so I'm thinking I can walk because it doesn't get too hot to walk, but you're still getting exposed to the sun. So I was thinking, do I get one of these caps that has like the thing that covers the side of your face as well? But a wide brim hat would probably do all of that. So that's actually a really good idea. I'm taking note
Yeah,
of that one, Felix. So thank you very
yeah,
much.
I actually
Now,
have one right here. So you
right?
know, having a brim of at least, I would advise at least 3 centimeters would be
Yeah,
a good idea. And you can see that, shading not only my face, but
no,
the
yeah,
neck as well. And I think, people, after just using it for, a day or so, they'll really appreciate that. Um, Andrea likes to call it my Dora la Exploradora hat. So, maybe
Dora the
it's not
Explorer
maybe
hat,
the
yeah.
most fashionable thing, but really, for your skin, supposedly 90% of all skin aging is caused by the sun. And this is something people usually don't realize until it's been damaged. And then like 10 years later, their skin is all wrinkled and there are age spots and the risk of melanoma increases a lot. So this is something I would highly recommend for most people. And it's something I don't see many Pellegrinos doing at all. And even on days where it's cloudy, the UV index still could be, as high as like 6 or 7. And usually it's advisable to be wearing sunscreen when the UV index is only 3. So, and then there are going to be plenty of days when there might be a break in the clouds. The UV index could be 9 or 10, and that's going to roast your skin, within minutes. So having that protection, I think is pretty essential.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one for me as well because from so much skin protection is full of so many damaging chemicals as well. So I think it's also about choosing your skin protection really carefully. That doesn't
Exactly.
have like, those harmful chemicals that mess up your endocrine system and your hormones, and there's so much harmful stuff out there. So it's
Yeah.
the points you make are completely valid about skincare and protection, but I would also add to that and say, mate, your cosmetics or your lotions carefully.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I have an app.
Um,
I've mentioned it before in this podcast. An app called Yuka, Yuka, and you scan the barcode on different products, and it tells you if it's got good stuff or bad stuff in it, basically.
yeah,
And
I've heard of it,
it's
and
quite shocking.
exactly, yeah. And you raise a good point. A lot of these sunscreens do have chemicals. They get absorbed into the skin. They go directly into your bloodstream. So what I would highly advocate is the sunscreen should be kind of the last barrier of protection here. I mean, it should be your last line of defense, not your first, which is what I think most people think of sunscreen as, they put on sunscreen and they're fine. What's generally much better than sunscreen is clothing. Like, even if you have to wear sleeves or wear a collared shirt, um, that's going to be far more protective than sunscreen without the risk of chemicals. And you're also not at risk of missing a spot. I mean, this is something I just experienced last week. Last week, I did this 200-mile bike ride from Fort Collins to Steamboat Springs in Colorado, and I was wearing sleeves. I was wearing long tights. Um, I forgot to put some sunscreen on my wrist, and so there's a gap between my hands, my gloves, and the sleeves. And then so I got some sunburning here. You probably can't really see it on the
Wow.
camera. But so yeah, just be mindful of protection, especially if you're going to be out there all day. I mean, it's a good idea.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Is that it should be the last line of protection, not the first. Really, really good point there. And I've never thought of it like that, to be honest with you. So yeah, you're definitely giving me extra to think about for my next Camino. On your blog, you tease about the 3 Ps. What does that mean, the 3 Ps?
Yeah, so the 3 Ps for me are patience, perseverance, and the ability to problem solve. Now, those are the 3 things
Sorry, the connection just cut out on that last one. The ability to,
to problem solve, to solve
right.
problems. So, uh, yeah, so patience, perseverance, and problem solving, the 3 Ps. And for me, those are some of the qualities I've developed over the years to do some pretty extraordinary things. Like, I consider myself someone who is lacking in talent in many things. In fact, I would even say I have an extraordinary lack of talent. But I've been able to do some pretty extraordinary things by having these 3 qualities. Now, regarding patience, for most things, that are extraordinary or worth doing, there's usually an element of either it requires a lot of work, it requires a lot of preparation, requires a lot of time, and it requires patience so that you just don't throw in the towel early. Like, for example, I think I have kind of a lack of coordination. It's just activities that require natural coordination. Well, I'm talking about swimming or rock climbing or dancing. I don't pick up very easily. Um, but um, by being patient with the process and not being like, okay, I just don't have the talent in this. Um, that's helped me become proficient in at least some of those things. Like, I became pretty proficient in swimming. I ultimately did a few Ironman triathlons that entail swimming 2.4 miles. The year before my first Ironman, I could not swim at all. I mean, if you threw me in the lake, I would have drowned. But just being patient with the process, that was vital. Other things like learning languages, I think that's something one needs a long-term outlook for, and needing to be patient with the process. Like, I mean, granted, I hear about people who learn a language fluently in 6 months or 3 months. Well, I think more realistically for most people, I'm talking about many, many years. Like for me, like I've been learning in addition to, I speak Spanish fluently. French is pretty good. Mandarin Chinese, that is something that's been a long process. And I've been looking at that even from the very outset that, this is something that could take 10 years, maybe 20 years just to reach a level where I'm comfortable going into a restaurant and, ordering food and having basic conversations, So that's where the patience come in. Perseverance ties into that. Like, not giving up, even though you encounter various obstacles. And it can easily make up for a lack of talent. There are many ultra endurance events I've done where, for example, one of them was a mountain bike race from Canada to Mexico. I could have easily given up during many points of that race. I mean, there wasn't a period of more than 3 days when I didn't encounter some sort of crisis, like some sort of mechanical crisis or some physical problem or running out of food, but not giving up and having the assurance that, this is a temporary situation. If I don't give up, I can get through it. That's a pretty essential quality. And then the last one, of course, is the ability to problem solve, because in any endeavor that is difficult or epic or what one might think as extraordinary, one is going to encounter obstacles and problems, and um, being resourceful and thinking, okay, how can I work through this? What can be done to solve this little issue, this obstacle? That's the third quality, I think, that has enabled me to do some of the things I've managed to do in my life.
That's so lovely to hear the way that you've just taken something you didn't feel that you were too proficient at, too competent at, but you've come through it. You've achieved what you set out to achieve by applying those three P's: patience, perseverance, problem solving. And what really stood out to me from what you said as well is patience not only with the process, but also patience with yourself. Because
Oh,
I don't have patience with myself. And I guess a lot of pilgrims can maybe relate to that. Maybe they're on the Camino, maybe other people are going faster than them, maybe they're finding it harder than they ever thought it would be, because it might sound easy just going for a walk every day, but it bloody well isn't. It takes a toll on you mentally and physically. And when you have that pain, it's about understanding that this is all part of the process. And to be able to complete it, you do need to have that patience with the process, patience with yourself. Um, of course, perseverance is so important, because in those moments where you are losing patience and you do have some physical, mental challenges, it's important that you persevere. And applying it again to the Camino, we can encounter so many problems on the Camino. You mentioned one earlier, which was finding accommodation. You couldn't find accommodation. You end up sleeping in some random place. I've done the same as well. And there'll be other problems, maybe logistical problems, maybe personal problems, interpersonal problems that you could have. But it's about persevering. And also, you touched on there some of your other adventures. You mentioned biking from Canada to Mexico, which, my God, just sounds epic. And I need to tell you about some adventures one of my best mates has been on. But because this isn't really a Camino topic, but I want the listeners to get a feel for the kind of person you are, just please give a quick overview of the other adventures that you've embarked upon.
yeah. So I've gone on a number of ultra endurance adventures, including the cycling. So that was actually my first and primary recreational activity was cycling, and especially long distance cycling. I have done a double century ride, and that's a 200-mile bike ride, every single year since 1996. I just did one a week ago. That was like the 30th anniversary of my very first one. And so every year I've done at least one of those. I've touched upon the Tour Divide, which was the mountain bike race from Canada to Mexico. That's the race you do self-supported. That's the rule. Like if you are caught getting outside support, you're disqualified from the race. So you carry your own gear. It's a bike packing race. It's kind of the granddaddy of all bike packing races, the Tour Divide. And it's on a mountain bike along the continental divide of the United States. 90% is off-road, so I was doing it on a mountain bike. That's probably my most epic adventure, especially since it was back in 2008, the inaugural year of the Tour Divide. I was one of the 8 finishers of that race. At the time, people didn't even know if it was really possible to go the length in a self-supported manner. And, I touched upon some of the issues I encountered over there, like, running out of food, mechanical issues. And then I've also done a bike ride going from west to east of the United States called the Trans Am Bike Race. I did that in 2015. It was 7,000 kilometers, finished in 8th place in that race, making me, from my research, the 10th person in the U.S. to go racing in a self-supported manner from north to south and from west to east in the U.S. So those are some of my big biking adventures. I've also done some ones out of the country, like my first foreign bike race was Paris-Brest Paris. It's the oldest bicycling race in the world. It predated the Tour de France, did that in 2003. And then last year, went over to the UK to do London, Edinburgh, London, although that was curtailed due to Storm Flores. So I got up halfway to, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the town of Malton, but that's just midway between London and Edinburgh. And then the ride organizer said, okay, everyone turn around and go back to London because of Storm Flores. So did that last August. Then there were plenty of mountaineering adventures. I've done many 14ers. These are mountaineering adventures, scaling mountains over 14,000 feet, all in the US. So I've done some of those like Mount Shasta, Mount Whitney, some rock climbing adventures. But of all of those, one of my most maybe pleasant, memorable, and favorite is the Camino de Santiago. I think it's something that one doesn't need to be some uber athlete to do, for example. And it has many aspects that would appeal, I think, universally to many people. And it's one reason why for 1,100 years, there's so many thousands of people have embarked on the Camino.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's interesting that even though you've done all these adventures, you keep migrating back to the Camino, as we all do. And just to touch on it before, as I mentioned before, my very best friend, he roller skated all around Europe, not on inline skates, but on, old kind of 70s disco style skates.
Yeah,
He
that's
roller skated all
incredible.
2,500 miles around Europe. He BMX biked from Mexico City to Panama City. Um, there were these things invented called skikes, which are basically skis on wheels. So, and he did that from Hong Kong to Shanghai, in China. He's an absolute madhead, my best mate, and the stuff he comes up with, the ideas he comes up with. I always know he's scheming something. He did come up with an idea to raft the Mekong River, but I think he realized he would probably
Wow.
met his maker if he did that. And there's some other things he's done as well. Oh, he did a bike ride to Timbuktu as well, from Ghana,
Wow.
from Accra in Ghana to Timbuktu in Mali. Because we have a saying in England, I don't know if you have the same expression in America, but if you've been everywhere in one day, you've been this shop, that shop, you've done this, you've done that. We say, oh, I've been to Timbuktu and back. It's like an
Oh,
expression
yeah.
we have.
Okay, I have heard of that expression. Wow, yeah.
Yeah. So
This is your
he
friend
decided that
Paul, right? I
that's
read about
Chappers. Yeah.
him
Yeah.
in your book
Yeah. That's him.
about
Yeah.
the Camino
Yeah.
and was kind of blown
That's
away
him.
by those things. Yeah. Or
Yeah, he's an
chappers.
absolute madhead. Chappers, that's it. He's an absolute madhead. And so he actually decided to go to Timbuktu. Because everyone
Oh,
else
good for
says
him.
they've
Wow.
been there. So, and I've been helping him write a book about it. Not that he needs my
Oh.
help, but just helping him with the publishing stuff and with the editing process and everything else. So that's been a lot of fun. And listen, I'm going to say, Felix, it's a conversation for another day, but next time you're embarking upon one of these adventures, think about me and Chappers. We might have to join you, mate, because I need something like that back in my life. Right, let's get to the lap of honor round. Just like pilgrims can go on a lap of honor from Santiago to Finisterre, as we touched upon earlier, I'm walking an extra 100 kilometers. We're going on a lap of honor round now. So short, sharp, quick answers to these questions. Choice of rucksack and best thing about it.
I'm using this ultralight Cotopaxi pack that doesn't even weigh a pound. And so its biggest benefit to me is just the lightweight of it. I've traveled all over with it. It counts as a personal item on a plane. So then I don't even have to pay to be carrying on luggage. The
Sounds
company is called,
perfect. I need to you
yeah, Cotopaxi. I'll just put in a plug for them.
you need to send me a link to that. I want that.
Okay.
Choice of footwear and why.
Back in 2017, I was using minimalist shoes because I was doing the kind of the minimalist running craze for the longest time, but I would definitely do it in running shoes. Um, they're lightweight, they dry quickly, they're very comfortable, if you need to be running because you're getting to a town too late, well, you can run in them. So I use Saucony Kinvaras, but basically, I would just recommend anyone's favorite pair of running shoes, perfect for walking.
Camino's social media personality, YouTube account, something like that you recommend following?
Brad Chermside.
Thank you very much, mate.
Yes. Yeah,
Well,
I
that's
have to
very kind of you
admit
to
I
say. And
haven't
I
been
didn't
on
tell
YouTube
Felix to
too
say that, by
much,
the way.
but yeah, I definitely will be recommending you.
Oh, bless you, mate. Thank you very much. You're very kind. One thing you wished you'd packed on your last Camino. I think we touched on this already, but feel free to recap.
Yeah, the wide brimmed hat.
Perfect. Wide brim hat. Good to reinforce that idea as well. One thing you've since discarded from your packing list.
The laptop. No reason for that. Smartphone can
I
do
couldn't have
anything you need.
take a notebook and pen instead and then type it up when you get back.
There
Definitely.
you go.
A quote or mantra for tough times on the road.
Those who dare truly live. It's
Oh,
a
love that.
it's a quote by, I think her name was Ruth Friedman, and it's just something I remember was scribbled on the ground of a extremely hilly 140-mile organized bike ride I did called the
Goosebumps. You give me goosebumps.
yeah, and it was on like an 18% grade, and I remember reading that on the road, and it's just always stuck in my mind.
18% grade. Oh my
Like
God. No wonder
18,
your legs
yeah.
are like tree trunks. I've got knees of glass, so I don't think I could do that these days. But I'm working on that. I'm going to go and I'm looking at some revolutionary cartilage replacer. Anyway, that's another story. Go to snack to refuel whilst on the go.
Well, so for me, anytime I was bonking in, like, for example, in an ultra distance bike ride, the go-to thing for me would be Coke and mini donuts. Like, I know these things are generally not good for you in everyday living, and are not things I would recommend for a day-to-day basis. But if you're doing some crazy athletic event and you're bonking, bonking is a term for when you go into um, a glycogen debt and it feels like you
Lactic
hit the wall.
acids.
Yeah, exactly. I think the mixture of high fructose corn syrup and caffeine has helped me more than any engineered like sports nutrition like gels or something like Gatorade. No, it's always the Coke and mini donuts that's helped me when I really been in trouble. Now, granted, again, these are not things you want to be consuming on a daily basis, but for those so-called emergencies, that's my go-to thing.
Quick sugar hit. That would be, wouldn't it? Definitely. A place you wished you'd stayed over.
I wish I spent more time in Oviedo. I only spent a night over there. And again, I heard of Oviedo from watching the movie Vicky Cristina Barcelona, and I would love
Yeah.
to visit some of the sites that were featured in that movie in Oviedo. So that's certainly a town I would return to.
Interesting. No one's ever mentioned that before either. So something you'll do differently next time you walk the Camino Portuguese, for example.
Wear the wide brim hat. Don't bring a laptop or sleeping bag. And also, I would consider maybe doing a more normal distance for my next one. So back when I did the one in 2017, I only gave myself 3 weeks to do 1,000 kilometers. So basically 20 days to do 1,000 kilometers. It was 50 kilometers a day. And I did it. And I was fine. The problem with that is I would encounter people, but no one is doing that distance, generally, not on a day-to-day basis. So I would see them, one day, and then I would never see them again. And I kind of missed out on a more communal Camino. Like I know in your book, you met a number of pilgrims that you even were able to meet up with at the very end. And just having that shared experience is something I did miss on that one. And for my next one, I think I would maybe go at a more relaxed pace. Not that I was walking fast, it's just I was just walking for many hours a day, basically from sunset to
Yeah,
sundown.
that will definitely add to the experience for sure. Just that Camino family that you build up along the way. So that's a really good idea. And you sound like you're like me. You could just walk all day, every day. And yeah, I've been doing my recent Caminos with my wife, so it's more of a shared experience, like you say. But if I walk on my own, I'll just like go. So, but you do miss out on that connection with
Right.
your fellow pilgrims. So, yeah. Favorite time of the year to walk the Camino?
Not the summer, especially not during these days of global warming and heat waves.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
the spring or the autumn for sure. Now I know most people do it in the summer, but that's generally because that's when they get their time off. But if possible, try to do it in the spring, like maybe early May, maybe even April. Like April in Galicia generally is fine. Yeah, you might get rain on a little
yeah.
bit, but the temperatures are fine. I have a friend who just last week finished up a Camino, and this was during a heat wave, unprecedented heat wave in France, and in order to avoid the heat, had to be starting at 3 a.m. in the morning. So and
Yeah, that's crazy.
that was early June, so it seems like nowadays even June isn't exactly safe for the most comfortable Camino. So um, I did my Camino in September to October in 2017. Those were good months to do it. Um, so yeah, the winter time could be fine, but just keep in mind that a lot of hostels are closed during the winter because there are less pilgrims.
Yeah, it needs more planning in the winter. That's the advantage of the winter is that there's less people and the temperatures are a lot more kinder. Not so inhumane as the summer can be.
Yes.
But yeah, you do have to plan it. And in the summer, you get more accommodation options, but probably a lot of them are busy, completo anyway, as you said. So just before we go, Felix, when it's been such a wonderful chat. I've been so inspired by your adventures. I've been so inspired by your three Ps. I've been uplifted by your "those who dare truly live" quote. You've made me think there needs to be another mad adventure on the horizon.
Well,
Definitely. Not sure
likewise,
where that's going to be.
Brad, I've been inspired by your book, your books, because I read both of your books. Um, and by reading about your experiences, I already had thrown some of your adventures onto my bucket list, like Liverpool Leeds. That's something I would like to do, sometime in.
You'll find that too easy. It's too easy. It's flat. It's like a table.
Well, I would love to, do a lot of hiking in the UK. So it's
Yeah.
definitely something I would love to do in the future.
No, the hike in the UK is lovely and so green. You know, living in Spain, I do love Spain, but sometimes I feel like it's a bit of a dust bowl living in southeast Spain where I do. But I love going home. I'll be going home for the summer soon,
Oh,
so can't wait for that. Yeah, I'm going to spend like 6 weeks, 7 weeks in England. I'm going home next week, so this is July the 10th today or something like that. So I'm going home on the 18th until early September. So it's going to be nice to see friends and family again and do some hiking adventures. Um, so where can the listeners connect with you online, Felix?
Yeah, so the primary place would be my website, felixwong.com. That's FELIXWONG.com. I've been blogging on my website since 1995. This is well before blogging was even a term. And since then, I've written maybe about, well, actually well over 2,000 articles by now. Initially, the website was mainly for myself, just as a way to remember things I wanted to remember. And then over the years, it's been a way to share things I've learned and wanted to share with other people. And it's amazing how often I do have to visit my own website for just things I've forgotten. So that is probably the best way to connect with me. I've been trying to establish more of a presence on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Felix Does Epics. I've been trying to up my photography game a little bit, and would love to connect with other people. You know, like yourself. I'm glad you were on Instagram, and I was able to drop you a note there. So those are the two primary ways to connect with me, and I would love to connect with anyone from all over the world.
What song goes at the top of your Camino de Santiago playlist?
You know, I have to be honest, for almost all of my adventures, the hikes, the bike riding, running, I almost never listen to music. I usually just try to be in the moment, and I like being aware of my surroundings. But if I were to make a playlist, probably would be songs from the 1960s, which I think was the greatest era of music. Music from, I think, what most people, and this includes myself, would consider maybe a simpler time than now. So I'm talking about maybe songs by Simon and Garfunkel or the Righteous Brothers, the Ronettes. Um, yeah, that's what I would choose.
The song that just jumped into my head there was The Sound of Silence.
Oh yeah,
That's what you like to listen to.
that's perfect. Yes, great suggestion, Brad.
Yeah, I never listened to music when I very rarely listen to. I can't actually remember the last time I listened to music when I walk because, like you, I like to be in the moment. It's also good for safety as well, I think.
Exactly.
But obviously, sometimes when you get tired, a song can really fire you up. I know when I go for a run and stuff, I like to have music in my ears because put Led
Right.
Zeppelin on, I'm like kind of thing. But yeah, Felix, thank you for your time. Yeah, it's been a really lovely, uplifting interview. So much that the pilgrims will have learned and got out of this, not only for their Caminos, but for their own personal development as well. I've loved it. So, Felix, when you go and walk the Camino Portuguese in Porto, you're going to love that, by the way. It is a lovely Camino. It is, as is customary on this podcast, just say, buen camino.
Well, thanks so much, Brad. It's been a tremendous pleasure to be chatting with you, and thanks for the
Likewise.
inspiration. And I've gotten a lot of not only inspiration but entertainment from your books and your writing. And I can honestly say you're one of my favorite authors. So keep up the good work. And it's
Thank you, mate. That
been
means a lot.
a
Cheers.
tremendous pleasure for me to be chatting with you
Thank you, Felix.
right here.